What is it going to look like a year from now? Are we still going to be wearing masks? Do you think the vaccine story is going to be a little easier in terms of navigating for travellers? What kind of rules can we expect?
The vaccine story has been so positive. I mean, the UK has been leading the way in this, but the US hasn't been far behind. I think from a mask-wearing point of view, currently, it is what our passengers want and expect from us globally, and we are, after all, connecting people internationally here, and we need to make sure that we set the right standards compared to all of the other hubs that people will be travelling through. This time next year, it's really hard to say what the rules will be. What we are seeing is a softening of things like social distancing. People are now self-regulating more, and it's just wonderful to see passengers coming back through the airport, and particularly, of course, as of last Monday, we saw US passengers coming back into the UK, which was just wonderful to see. Families connecting again, sometimes after a 2-year period without seeing each other.
That's great. They can come here, but we can't go there. When do you think that's going to change?
Well, I'm really hopeful that come sort of end of Q3, we'll start to see a change in the US border policy. That is what we need. As you said, the UK government has opened up the border to US vaccinated passengers coming inbound, but we really need outbound passengers to be allowed into the US as well. It's a really key route for us, clearly a special relationship with the US, lots of family connections, but trade also really important on that link. So we are really encouraging the US government to review its border policy and come up with a similar framework which is vaccination-based to allow people to now travel into that critical economic route.
JetBlue, first flight in, great to see. It's a temporary status at the moment here at Heathrow for JetBlue. Have you got space for them? Is this going to become something that we can expect to be permanent?
I really would love to say yes, but I can't answer that question now. I would love to see JetBlue as a permanent feature of Heathrow's portfolio. It is actually the first new US carrier in 13 years that we've had at Heathrow. And, you know, COVID has been a terrible period for lots of people personally and professionally. But one of the positives has been that we've allowed some new entrants into Heathrow for the first time. And, you know, JetBlue leading the way in terms of their proposition. And I'm really excited for what that can bring for our passengers.
You've just published some data about what you saw in the month of July, up quite significantly year on year, but this time last year we were really in the depths of the COVID crisis. And relative to pre-pandemic, you're still down by around 80%. What we're starting to see is US carriers are starting to downgrade their expectations as we go into the autumn, into the fall. Is that what's going to happen here? Do you think the current trajectory you're on is going to be maintained? Do you think we're going to level off? What kind of numbers are you expecting to see over the next few months?
So we had a pretty prudent trajectory for this year. Our expectation was always that the second half would be slightly more positive than the first, and that is what we are starting to see. We've been in and are still in a global pandemic. It is a very unpredictable environment. But what we've seen through summer is confidence building. And that is what we need. We need people to understand it's safe to travel and that people need to start to get back to normal ways of life, normal ways of doing business. And when we have opened up routes, the demand has snapped back.
You mentioned business there. Do you think business travel does come back? We're sitting in a very nice lounge here. There are plenty of them dotted around Heathrow. I'm sure they're revenue generators for you. Do you think that the level of business comes back to where it was before?
I think it does, and I think it will take time. And we've certainly learnt new ways of doing business, haven't we? But it has also taught us that certain things can't be replaced. You can't build a relationship that isn't pre-existing from scratch over Teams or Zoom or whatever it is. And actually, when it comes to growing business, when it comes to making connections, you have to do that in person. So I think we've learned a lot of new skills, but they're going to complement the pre-existing ways of doing business, and that will absolutely need international connectivity. And let's not forget the trade, the stuff that goes in the belly hold of all of those passenger aircrafts, which is a huge boon to the UK economy, and we need to hang on to that, and it won't be there unless those passenger
I'm glad you bring that up, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Freight has been one of the areas that's really kept many of the carriers going, and freight rates have been relatively high. Do you see a more permanent shift when it comes to freight and it becoming a bigger part of the business model for the carriers, and by extension, obviously the airports they operate out of?
I think freight has been a hidden gem at Heathrow. It's always been there. Different carriers exploit it to a different extent. And what we've seen through COVID is carriers have really doubled down on their freight proposition. And that's been great because it's meant that routes that wouldn't have been viable have stayed viable through COVID. So I am expecting that freight will continue to grow. And as we bring routes back, we will see newfound opportunities for freight during that time.
Final question. A lot of the CEOs, CFOs, COOs that I'm talking to at the moment are talking about the struggle they're having in terms of getting the staff they need into their businesses. They're obviously looking at how they're going to vaccinate people, what kind of mandates they're going to require there as well. How are you running Heathrow right now? Any bottlenecks that you're experiencing?
I think the key thing that we found is a bit of skills fade. So we're putting a lot of investment into making sure that we train people up when they come back, especially if they've been out for a few months. They might be in a different terminal. They might be operating in a different part of the airfield when they return. So the key thing is we've got enough people by volume at the moment, but making sure when they come back, they're match fit and they're ready to go for a busy operation.
Great to talk, Emma. Thank you very much indeed for stopping by to talk to us. Emma Gilthorpe, the COO here at Heathrow.